The gender conversation continues, the gender agenda, as it were, over time, and asking ourselves very many questions about, in the run up to International Women's Day and making certain celebrations, and asking ourselves, should we move on? And we saw very clearly, and using the example of the LSK recently held elections, asking ourselves, why is it that then we had a group of women who independently decided or collectively decided that we are not sitting back and saying, okay, maybe we wait for something to be handed out to us as a token. But here we are, and seeing that out of 13 positions that were essentially up for grabs, women dominated in 10. Not sitting back and waiting for somebody to hand out something to us. How did this happen, Caroline?
It's not a secret that women have been traditionally marginalized in leadership positions. So at this time round, I think the ladies in the Law Society of Kenya took the courage to vie. And the primary consideration was competence. So it's the members of the Law Society comprising of both men and women chose women on competence. There were, if I could give the statistics, there were more men or gentlemen in the race than ladies for the various positions. And in an electoral process that members exercised their will and elected more ladies. I currently serve in the current council. We still had a big number of ladies in the current council. Only that this time around we've added the number to 10. One of the ladies, a senior member, was unopposed. So those who were elected at the ballot are 9. So for me, that ladies have now taken up the leadership competition is a good sign. Yes.
You say that there were more men than women vying.
Yes, for the various positions,
Yes.
there were more. Other than the presidency, where there were 2 male and 2 female candidates, and for the position of VP, we were only 2 of us, a male and a female. The general member had 7. General member representative position had 7 male contestants as against 2 ladies. The coast representative, that is the one that had 2 female and 1 male. And the disciplinary committee had all 4 male contestants. The upcountry representative had 9 male contestants and 3 female. In the general upcountry, all the 3 female went in. They only got an additional 1 male winner. In the Nairobi representative, there were 9 male contestants and 5 ladies. 3 ladies went in. The position did not attract any male winner. So in the LSK membership by gender, this does not mean that the people who made it, the ladies who made it, were elected by the ladies. Because the ladies are, as of 2019 December, the female population in terms of gender in the Law Society are 73-64. That makes up for 44%.
We're having the gender conversation today, joined in the studio with the newly elected Vice Chair of the Law Society of Kenya, Caroline Kamende, with us this morning and discussing issues having to do with gender parity, and saying, as the conversation then heats up in the country, around the world, and people are talking about gains that have been made in the fight for equal representation for women, whether it be at levels in society or levels in government, and asking ourselves the question quite regularly, women representation, are we seeing a time now where it's going to take the country or society by storm?
The 2/3 gender role on composition of the membership of any body has been an issue. And it's not a women issue at all. it is an issue that is of constitutional imperative. So for me, that we are now moving where ladies, more women, are taking up the courage to vie for competitive leadership positions is one way of achieving this constitutional principle that has been litigated on for long. And what the Constitution did not do, it did not provide for a guide for guidelines on how to implement this. There's been a lot of litigation on this issue, and what we are now seeing is that women are taking up the courage to vie for this position because it is not being handled at the constitutional bodies that should deal with that.
What stopped us before? What stopped women before from taking up these roles?
I think it's the historical injustices, and more specifically, I think this is the elective positions in both public bodies and private bodies have been taken up by men. I think just the courage to take up those positions, because most ladies will feel that this is a male-dominated area, and we have been retrieving from taking up these positions.
Why did you put yourself up for election at the LSK?
I tried in 2016. I failed. Then I took a back. I decided I'm not going to vie. But in 2018, I took the courage again, vied, and I won. And in I realized that I am a leader. I can lead, and I can do what any other gender can do, male and female. So in 2019, I took the challenge. I said, let me go for a higher post, and I made it. So I think for me, it's the courage and also confidence that we put ourselves out there. I know ladies also, we fear the murky waters. But I just decided to venture in, and for me, I'm happy. I'm also happy about the composition in the current council. I must also say that members of the Law Society exercised their free will in an electoral process, and the primary consideration, as I said earlier, was competence. So it does not mean that the other male contestants were not competent, but I think members found ladies were more favorable in the ballots.
I don't want to water down this achievement, because research even in this country has found that many employers actually prefer to employ women. They are considered to be loyal, they are considered to be reliable, and they are considered to be almost industrial activity free. They don't go around going on strike. The only time the employer may have a complaint is when they're expectant. But having said that, that's why I asked for those figures. Would you not say that the men very generously divided the votes among themselves, because many of them stood? So in so doing, they gave the ladies a fairly nice opportunity, because if all the ladies sort of like supported their candidates and the men divided their votes among their candidates, the ladies were more likely statistically to
land on something.
I don't think so. Like if you look at my position, for example, we were only two of us. We were a lady, that is myself, and a gentleman. If you argue that all ladies voted for ladies, then that would be wrong, because I think in the history of this country, the LSK, I got the most votes, almost 4,000 votes. That means that I got votes from both male and women in the society, because I had 3,925 and 75 votes.
That's 4,000.
Yeah.
That's 4,000, as against my opponent's 1,800. If you look at the ladies in the presidency, if you also add their votes, you still find that the male candidate was way ahead. So really, I think members made a resolute decision at the ballot, regardless of the gender. Yes.
So can we see that it translates that for the top position, people, across board, are still comfortable then with a man? Because if you...
No, wait. Are they comfortable with the man or are they comfortable with this individual?
For me, I think they are comfortable with the individual. Because unlike the constitutional requirement that under Article 250(11), that in the constitutional commissions we should have one, if the chair is a man, then the vice should be a lady. We do not have that in the LSK structure. So to me, it was members were more comfortable, or rather voted for the member that they needed them to lead the society. So on competence and probably persuasion during the campaigns. I don't think it was more of the gender.
So that's what I was going to ask. Just does the gender role take any kind of precedence here and saying that, we need to see women coming in to take up these positions, or it doesn't even feature at all? Whereas if you look at the country profile, the national profile of this, it's often that there's more agitation for gender representation when it comes to leadership. Did that play out in this sense? Because many have said that this example can then be used to translate to national government and see how they can also take this gender fight to those doors.
For me, in the law society, the just concluded elections, I really do not think that the gender card played at all. Because like I give an example of my position, and I also give the statistics of the number of eligible voters in terms of male and female. We have more male members of the society that translate to 56% as at 2019 December than the female. And in some of these positions, if gender was to play, then we would have had more men or all ladies, because the voting required that they choose 2 or 3 representatives. So if members were to choose ladies, then we would have a uniform representation from all ladies. If we use the same number that voted, we would also have had all men representatives. But I think members here chose. There was a resolute decision. Because you can see, if you also look at the results, the margin between the candidates, both male and female, shows that there was stiff competition. So in some categories, a member would be required to vote for 4, 3 or 2. So for me, if gender was to play a card, then we would have had a uniform representation all through. So I don't think gender was really a factor, because if there is more men in the membership, then I would not have got this position. That means that I was voted in by both men and women who believed in me
on the basis of your competency.
Competence, yes.
Right.
Yes. And during the campaigns, one of the key issues was scorecard. So you find that most the members have gone back. Not all of us have gone back. So we had to really show members and prove that we need to go back. So we've had only ladies going back to their respective positions. I think 4 or 5 of us are going back.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I were to ask this question, in the history of the LSK, what would you say are some of its greatest achievements?
I think one of the greatest achievements the Law Society is to guide the courts, and especially during the constitutional dispensation, and also to develop the law, and also to develop the rule of law in terms of PIL cases that LSK has taken up in line with the objectives under Section 4. I think the lawyers and the Law Society played a key role in the transition from the old constitution to the new constitution in terms of creating jurisprudence and interpretation of the constitution. All those Supreme Court advisory are usually done, or the foundation of lawyers So I think the Law Society has achieved that mandate. Yes.
And on the line today with us, Priscilla Nyokabi, the commissioner with the National Gender and Equality Commission. As we go further into the discussion, Priscilla, good morning.
Good morning. So sorry. I would have used the border were it not for the rain.
I know it's the rain and the traffic compounding things today, but we have you online, so that works as well, right?
Thank you.
So the conversation continues, and we're asking ourselves as we're rounding about and going towards looking at gender parity, equality, equal representation. I'm going to start with you now, Priscilla. When we talk about parity, what exactly are we looking at?
Gender parity is the higher threshold because gender parity is 50-50. So equal representation for men and women. It might take us a little bit longer to get to gender parity. It is in our constitution in the employment arena, especially the public service, that the public service should go for gender parity. But in leadership, the negotiated threshold was the 2/3 gender rule, so that neither gender exceeds 2/3 of the representative slot or the leadership slot. But gender parity is where we are going. It will take us a bit of time to get there. We need to first get onto the 2/3, and then once we are on 2/3, then we can continue making steps towards gender parity.
It seems like it's a discussion. It's still being talked about. This 2/3, is it possible?
We are putting a lot of effort now with the constitutional review exercise because we got it in the constitution without the formula. So what we need now are the formulas that allow us to go for it. And there are two ways. One is the quota system, what we have of the special seats. And that is because culture and many problems with our electoral system and many problems with our traditional ways of looking at women don't allow us to get to the equal step, as it were. Then the other one is proportional representation, where you have an electoral system, you elect the party, and then people just kind of, move party, and you don't elect individuals.
Right.
So that way, and in countries like South Africa, the electoral system has made it much easier for women to be able to be elected. The first past the post, which is what we have here, is a very, very difficult process for women. First past the post. I mean, if we were running today with a man, they would by now have the seat. Me, I have a baby in the morning. I have other, biological roles and family roles. And I also have other challenges traditionally. So that first past the post does not look at other criteria that you need for the purpose of leadership.
Right.
So the formulas now, and that's why we are in the BBI process. BBI process might culminate into a constitutional bill or a constitutional review exercise. If that's going to happen, then we as women are going to ask that the formulas are put in the constitutional document. You don't leave Parliament to do that. We've seen it's very difficult for Parliament. Just let's have the formula in the Constitution.
But Priscilla, we've talked about competence, and joining the conversation, we have Caroline Kamende, who's here with us, talking about the fact that they presented themselves. And here it is where they had a track record of being able to have a scorecard that worked. And upon this is where people were able to make the decision to put them into positions of office. Just taking the LSK as an example. Do all of these traditional setbacks or hiccups that you've talked about just now, past the post and such, do they really stand in the way if women, let's say, are presenting their credentials? Or are we saying that it's different when we look at society and when we look at national government?
Well, we are very happy about the LSK, and congratulations to Caroline and team for the big win that they have had. I mean, everybody's quite excited. But Caroline and I remember just not very long ago, this conversation of not more than 2/3 was with the LSK. Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi, who was then chairman of the Law Society, and actually at his time of election, this particular conversation we are having now, just about 10 years ago, we were having it at the LSK because at the time, we didn't have as many women elected. And so what it means is that, which is also our view, that the quotas are not permanent. You use them for the purposes of now showing the competence, showing those other criteria that then lead to your election. Otherwise, this conversation we are having now was a motion with the Law Society of Kenya members in an AGM, asking them to have slots for women in terms of the council and in terms of leadership. But even the LSK itself, you will find that we have only had one woman president.
Why is that?
Even as progressive as we have only had, so that it is a journey. Now that Caroline is vice chair, and we've had quite a number of vice chairs who are women. I think that we had the other vice chair, Harriet Chigai. So the ceiling is not broken yet. We've come a long way. But we still need to get to the very top, which is the presidency. And so this conversation around empowerment of women and around the quotas is still very valid. Because I belong also to the ICJ, the International Commission of Juries, Kenya section, and another lawyer's body. I don't even think we've had a woman president at all. But even more importantly, when you go into an election on another lawyer's body, you find that it is not as easy. We are only 2 women on that council, 3 women, and 1 woman has had to be brought in by the 2/3 gender rule. So the rule is a platform. It is not a permanent step. We get onto the platform, we are able to show our competence, and then after that we can get elected. And I'm hoping that Caroline now, they also move forward now to the presidency and to also good leadership, so that in the next election we can even have the seats retained. Yeah.
So is that in plan, Caroline? And as we continue with Priscilla, of course, is that in plan, Caroline, to say that, or do you see this as a stepping stone towards being able to have some kind of representation at the very top for women?
Yes, and let me start by saying that what Priscilla says is true, that we have not had, other than Rachel Omamo in 2001 to 2003, we have not had a lady as a LSK president. But I must commend Madam Maria Mbeneka and Harriet Chigai. They took up the courage and they vied for the position of LSK presidency. That is a good sign that we are also on the way to breaking the ceiling, because we have not had, personally, from my 16 years that I've been an advocate, I've not had or seen any lady dare vie for that seat.
Dare to even vie?
To even vie for that seat. So the Maria Mbeneka and Harriet Chigai have also given us and shown us that it is possible to even win that position. For me also, it's not also about gender, like I've said before. It's about competence. I'm not trying to say that the 2 ladies were not competent. What I'm saying is that members exercised their will at the ballot. But it is a good sign. There's light at the end of the tunnel. So I think ladies are now more courageous to take up these elective positions. Yes, so to me, for now, I want to ensure that I serve members, and I showed them that their vote of confidence, because I got most votes, that gives me and puts a bigger liability on my shoulders to serve members. If I serve them well, I'm sure they will be able to vote me in again for either the presidency or even the vice president. Vice president, yeah. But I'm aiming to go higher. Yes.
Priscilla, can we see this translated to the national level? What we're saying now, that if it is based on competence, then why don't we have more, if it is a competence thing? Because we've seen an example here that, people voted based on your scorecard or what they have seen that you have been able to do. Why can't we then see that translate at the national level?
Now that's where we have a problem. We've got a big disconnect between what is happening in the professional world and what is happening in the political world. I mean, I would want somebody like Caroline now to consider vying in her own constituency. She's already been vice president. She needs to do what Kajuju did. Kajuju was vice president of the Law Society, and then she went and vied in Meru. But even she vied on the women rep seat, which is, it's still something to vie. So the conversation now for the women who've been elected and women who've led, even Harriet, Maria Beneka, who have really done a fast by vying for the presidency, I think that these are the women that we need now in our political space. But then that political space is so untidy and so bad for women. Many people will not get into it. Nobody would want to compete with some of the men that we have in the arena, and the type of competition they put you through. If it was a competition for competence, for your points, for your vision, a competition on what you can do, and a competition on what you can deliver, now that's a fair competition. That's not what we get in politics. In politics, you get a mad world, Unatupa tu matope, right, left, and center, And the more matope you throw, is like the more the vote. So that is why this effort of cleaning the electoral system is an effort, and I'm hoping that Caroline, and who knows about other things as well, sexual harassment in the workplace, there are many other things that affect women, and you can imagine if there's sexual harassment in the professional world, there's much more of it in the political world.
Right.
And so this effort of cleaning the electoral environment is the first place of call. When the electoral environment is a little cleaner, and now you can come onto a platform where you share your vision, where you share what you can do, I think we're going to see more women elected. And to encourage the women who have a platform to use that platform as a stepping stone, so that they use the LSK now to get onto the national leadership.
What would you say are the efforts that have been made, say, by the ICJ and the LSK towards cleaning up not only the image of our electoral process, but ensuring that the actual process is clean, not just the image?
Yeah, good effort has gone on, and good effort has gone into it, but there's still some distance to be covered. For example, on implementation of Chapter 6. If we had the leaders in the political environment conform and comply with leadership and integrity credentials as envisaged by the Constitution, that would have been much better. Because now, I mean, for someone like me who contests, you really, really get it rough. I mean, people even sexually harass you on the campaign trail. You get insults, your family is brought into it, your husband and children. You are abused not for the things that you can do. I mean, I got a baby just before the election, and it became such an issue, and the baby is not lying, It's just like, my God, what the hell is this now? And you can't convince people that you can be a mother and a leader. And so that cleaning, there is a cleaning that is gender sensitive that still needs to be done. We need to clean the electoral system properly so that IEBC is strong and voted as they are. But one of the other things that we need is the political party primaries. Remember, the problem isn't just at the election. There is a big problem with our party primaries. So either we allow IEBC to come on to party primaries, or we get a cleaner way of doing party primaries. You've seen party primaries are even panga na shoka. You show up with a panga and shoka, literally, So that party primary, upon your kazi. The efforts have done well. We have some democracy. I mean, we're not complaining that much. In a house that, for example, has the 47 women reps, has the 24 elected women. But if you do 24 out of 290, that's just about 7%. So you can see the distance that we have. 3 senators out of 47 senators. That is 6%. 3 governors out of 47. That is 6%. In fact, they are saying if we go at the pace we are going, it will take us 100 years.
Well,
But we don't have 100 years. We need to move a little faster. So more effort is still required.
We're on the line with Priscilla Nyokabi, a commissioner with the Gender and Equality, the National Gender and Equality Commission, and in the studio with Caroline Kamende, who is the newly elected vice chair of the Law Society of Kenya. We're going to take a break, but the conversation continues. I'm going to ask you to stay on the line, Priscilla, as we continue with this, because then looking at the reasons as to why then the problem seems to be as deep as it is. And are we scaring other women from coming on board if we look at how bad the situation is right now? We are looking at the gender conversation, discussion, and going as deep as possible to see right around coming again to another International Women's Day and saying beyond the conversation what exactly is being done. In the studio with us today, Caroline Kamende, who is the newly elected vice chair of the Law Society of Kenya, Siti Muga, myself, Nduoko, and on the line with us, Priscilla Nyokabi, who is a commissioner with the National Gender and Equality Commission. And we're going into this now. And Priscilla, I hear from Caroline that, regardless, we said we're going to go forth, regardless of whatever stereotypes may be there, whatever may have been said and done. Is it different if we're looking at it on the national scale and saying, would women have a harder time with all these roadblocks that seem to pop up, according to what you're saying?
Well, I think the first thing, which is what I agree with Caroline on, is that you have to vie. We must present ourselves. Even before anything else, I think we must fight the cobwebs and we must fight the barriers in our own heads and the barriers around us, at personal level. Because it takes a lot of courage for you to vie. It takes a lot of courage for you to present yourself as a candidate. I think it took a lot for Caroline to go for vice chair, for Harriet and Maria Beneka to try for the presidency. It takes a lot. So the first win is the self-battle. We win that self-battle because even if you look at the national level, we have about 1,000 women candidates, and 14 or 15% get elected. We have like 10,000 men candidates, and 14 or 15% get elected. So what it means is that if more women vied, we would have more women elected. There are counties where they would want to elect a governor woman, but there is none on the ballot. All the persons on the ballot are male. So we can't even know whether that county would ever elect a woman because there was none in the contest. So I think the first big battle for us women is going to be to vie. We must vie and vie and vie. Actually, in our presentation for nomination seats, we were even proposing that the nomination seats should go to women who tried first. They should go to women who vied already, so they came some distance. And that way it means you have some popularity, you have learned how to present yourself on the podium, you have learned to have a vision, how to convince people on that vision. So the first step is the self and is the vying. But then the other one is the sort of issues we need in terms of law, so preparing yourself with the legal knowledge, because the processes are also very legal. And then the other one is going to be the skills that we now need on the national platform. Because eventually, even when we get onto the national platform, you find that the women candidates are others. Kuna farasi wawili, the usual, na punda wengine wanasimama. So we women have tended to be in the punda category. It is time we presented ourselves to the farasi, we elevate ourselves to the farasi situation. So the skills we learn from bodies like LSK are important, but there is a lot more sharpening and a lot more, because also the numbers. In LSK, you are talking to 10,000, sort of sophisticated group. In the national platform, you're talking of thousands of voters. I mean, in a constituency, in counties like Nyeri, you're talking of 500,000 registered voters that you have to convince. So we just need to use the skills we have, but sharpen those skills some more, and work in partnership. Another thing we have lacked is the sisterhood.
Right.
So that the sisters in one space can help the sisters in another space. Like now with the BBI process, I'm hoping that the sisters in LSK are going to come out strongly to make sure that process delivers some gains for women.
Right. Caroline, do you see that this position or this process that you've gone through recently has primed or would prime you or any other woman to be able to get into, even if we're talking about national politics later on?
Yes, I think I agree with Priscilla that you need the skills, because this was a very rigorous campaign trail, and the skills would be how to engage members. What I saw working was one-on-one engagement, and that is the same skills that you need for national platform to campaign. Of course, I will also agree with Priscilla that there are those biological roles that with people with children, like in these campaigns, I know there was a lady who had just delivered before the elections, and she was not able to travel. So to me, but that is not a bar from going for the seat. Once you put your name up there, you have a responsibility also to campaign and campaign harder, convince members. So for me, is the skills, and you also, this was a professional campaign, but you still have to go down to every town, engage members, convince them, tell them I'm the right candidate. We also had forums like debates where we were all exposed to the same questions and engagement. For me, other than competence, you also need to learn how to engage members and convince. For someone to, it's uniform for somebody to vote for you, whether in the national platform, professional platform, or any other platform. You also need to do a lot of convincing. You need to tell them, this is what I've done, or this is what I'm capable of doing if you're a new entrant. So for me is also a lot of hard work. I had to brave many cold nights. I had to leave my children behind, my family behind. So for me, it's also hard work because I think I traversed the whole of this country. Yes, which now is can also make me vie for a national position because now I have learned the skills. Go down there, go to the roots, talk to members.
You have an understanding of it, I have a feel for it, really.
Yes. So what one needs to do is to come up with the strategy and map out where votes are and where voters are. Whether they're professional, they're normal wananchi, you still have to go and do a lot of convincing. But I think also you also have to get a hard skin because you will have all this thing mad thrown at you.
Let me ask this question.
Yes.
When you're campaigning for a position in the LSK, you're talking to fellow lawyers, aren't you?
Yes.
People of similar background in training, similar way of looking at life, really. But do you apply the same thoroughness when it comes to thinking about national positions as to understanding the voter, why they do what they do? See, all these things we say, the insults, the way they treat you. The question that comes to mind, is it the men who do this against the women? Do also women do this against other women? But there's a layer of the land that we refer to as national politics. How much time do you invest in actually understanding that this particular game, this is how it is played, so that you're prepared adequately for it? Because from what I heard, that many ladies who vie for national positions get surprised and shocked, which tells me you're not prepared. Because it's either, if you're going to go into it, you understand the lay of the land. The need to change things, understand, takes time. But if you don't fully understand what it entails, and those insults and those things that we talk about, it's part of it, then it probably points to your unpreparedness. Is that a fair statement coming from me?
I will look at it this way. First and foremost, you will, because it's a competition.
Yes.
You will get all manner of insults or mud thrown your way in favor of your opponents. And for me, you must first make the decision to vie. When you throw yourself out there, you have to say, I will deal with whatever comes my way. So, because it's still an election, whether it is a professional election or not, you will still get opponents, people throwing those distasteful words.
Even in a professional election?
Even in a professional election.
So it's representative in a way of the national platform.
Precisely.
So Priscilla, are women unprepared as you look at this? Are they unprepared?
No, I wouldn't say that, because, the things we do, we lead our family. So we've been preparing for life, I mean, we make very serious decisions at home. And we make very far-reaching decisions. A lot of women now make decisions even on investment at home.
Right.
And make sort of leadership, small Christian community, the market committee, PTA, our Parents Teachers Association meetings are really mostly by mothers. Fathers were hardly playing any role there. So we are prepared in the sense of the space that we occupy and the decisions we have to make routinely.
Right.
I think what we are unprepared for is the level of I don't know what I can do to tell you. I was a lawyer, for example. I was prepared to confront insults on my family and all. But also the amount of money you have to give in the national space, you are unprepared for that. I don't think anyone can prepare you for that.
Nobody can.
No amount of preparation can help you with that. And then the other one also is that, patriarchy is a system. You find that within the party ranks, there are a lot of liberal men who now want to allow women space. But there are also a lot of patriarchs. So you are sometimes unprepared for the level of hostility within your own party that you're going to face. So party does remain unconvinced on women candidates. If, for example, the party, look at the example of Nairobi, where we have 17 constituencies, and we have, this one has traditionally been a Jubilee seat, this one has traditionally been a CORD seat. So like Kibra has traditionally been a CORD, position, the Kibra area. They are very, if you present yourself as a woman, the party leader thinks, so now you want me to lose the seat, It doesn't see him as one who can help him to win the seat.
Right.
He just sees how he is now risking the seat because a woman candidate has come on. Okay. So that level, the hostility, you are unprepared on the hostility, and you are unprepared on the money. But in terms of being a good candidate and convincing people, that we have years of preparation around. In the other roles that we play. Within the leadership.
I'm going to ask to keep you around for another 10 minutes or so, Priscilla and Caroline, to just look at then strides that we're going to make to see how we can actually make these strides towards, getting to that place where we say it's equal if at all possible. In the studio this morning with myself and Duoko Siti Muga, and we're joined by Caroline Kamende, who is the newly appointed Vice Chair of the LSK, and online with us is Priscilla Nyokabi, who is a commissioner with the National Gender and Equality Commission, looking at issues gender this morning and looking at the fight towards equal representation amongst genders. Priscilla, are we closer? It's not like it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago even. Are we close, or things are just as bad as they were before?
No, I think it's getting better with the distance that we have come. Instead of 10 years ago, I mean, there are women in Kenya who are in Beijing, and they are able to share what it was like during the Moi regime. And even I'm just, can I come in and just do it from the studio?
Go ahead, Priscilla. Yes.
Yeah. So 10 years ago, I think not even 10, 20 years ago, things were much more difficult. We just came from the Mount Kenya, Kiloru Stadium Declaration, a lot of gender content in there. So things are getting better. And we're hoping that it even gets better than it has so far.
Yes. And so Caroline, what do you see? Obviously, you are not. You are aware of how it has been over time. You see a totally different situation now. What do you see? And moving forward,
the driver got lost.
For me, I think there has been improvement since we started talking about the gender composition in both elective and appointive bodies. I think we are getting better, and we're getting somewhere. Like for the Law Society, I'm on record coming up with the sexual harassment and anti-bullying policy. I developed that when I convened the gender committee. So I can say that at the Law Society, we now have a safe and equal opportunity for everyone and a safe environment. For me, also, women empowerment. Any election is a very expensive process, whether it is a professional body election or otherwise. It's an extremely expensive affair. So we need resources. We need to empower ladies. We need to empower women. We need to take the courage, because the courage is the most important virtue. Because without it, we cannot exercise any other virtues consistently. So we need the courage. We need resources. For anyone to vie, you need money. The Law Society had tried to come up with regulations that will say will probably provide a platform that we don't need to travel. The branches will host debates and CPD seminars, but that was shut down. So it's still an expensive affair.
Why was it shut down?
At the AGM, members felt that we will let it be a free process, let members campaign the best way they know how. And having come from that process myself, I will assure you, if you don't have the means to traverse the country, convince members in the branches, those in Mombasa, those in Kisumu, whether if you're not able to afford, then it will be very difficult for you. So for me, we need to create equal opportunities. We need to come up with, especially in the professional bodies, strategies and ways that we can expose members to forums where they don't have to spend money to reach members.
Right. I mean, having this conversation, CT, we've talked about this many, many times, and you feel like, women should actually jump out and say, look, regardless of what has happened previously, I am going to come out and take this position. However you want to look at it, I'm putting up myself for election, and as opposed to waiting and saying, well, do me this favor because of the fact that I am a woman.
When you say do me a favor, you're actually referring to something called affirmative action. And affirmative action gets its relevance from the understanding that there are people, by virtue of either their gender distinction or ethnic distinction or linguistic distinction or religious belief, have been marginalized. So in order to provide what could be an approximate semblance of balance, you have affirmative action. And what is certain about the two-third gender rule in my opinion, it was affirmative action, because for the longest possible time, women were marginalized. There were many things that women simply were not allowed. It wasn't written down. Our cultures, the way we did things, and then our socialization. And ladies, on this note, since I'm the only gentleman here, I want to point out to the role of women in encouraging this marginalization of themselves. Because women are mothers of sons. And when you talk about men and the attitudes they have, we have to consider that the role that these mothers play in shaping the minds of these men.
No, it's absolutely important. And Priscilla, you're here with us. It's like magic. We were on the phone and then here you are. Voila. Thanks for making time to come in and continue the conversation with us. And I think that's a very important point here, because we even talking about women then voting in other women. There seems to be a disconnect there for the understanding that women can actually make a difference. Women are the ones who raise sons and in many cases propel the same narrative that we're trying to extinguish. How can that work in this whole sphere of things that seems to be so difficult to navigate?
Well, I think it starts early, and he speaks correctly about the issues of affirmative action. It starts from as early when you have a boy and a girl. When you buy a boy the car and a girl the doll, you are shaping their worldview. You are saying that you, girl, please play with the doll. That's your sphere. That's your domestic sphere. And you're saying to the boy, please dream and dream big about the cars that you want to drive. And so as mothers, it is indeed true. Even in inheritance. I mean, it's one thing for me not to have the land that my father has, but it's another thing for me not to give my daughter the land that I have acquired for myself, or the car or the shares that I have acquired for myself. And so there's a lot of socialization we have to deal with. Even in gender-based violence, it is mothers who tell you, enda uvumilie tu.
Or what did you do?
I know. What did you do? How did you cook the food? You know, now it gets back to you are the victim and you are also the one who made him slap you. He didn't slap you because he wanted to slap you. He slapped you because you did something. And it's your mother who tells you, no, enda tundo ando ivo. Now, we mothers must change. We must allow our boys and girls to grow up the same. I had a mother who we had a duty rota for kuosha vyombo. Hiyo kuosha vyombo did not exempt the young men. Sister anaosha leo, brother anaosha kesho. Jikoni is not a no-go zone for any of the genders. When we went back to Nyeri, where the culture is a little bit more patriarchal, our brothers didn't even go to the kitchen. It was a revolution in our home. The first time we told my brothers, you eat your food, you take your plate to the kitchen. Why would I have to take your plate to the kitchen? You, please, take the plate to the kitchen. Cook your own eggs, cook your own tea, clean for yourself. So that has got to be done. And it is only in that way that men and women will start to be equal. But for as long as culture brings us up as the ones to do traditional house roles and duties, and then the men to do something different, then it becomes very, very difficult later on. But it's a long-term process. The reason why us lawyers are running with the law is because that socialization will take us time. The generation of our mothers came some distance. Our generation will go. I mean, a lot of our mothers are, for example, not graduates. They went up to some level in school. They are able now to bring up daughters who are graduates. Then we have to keep this conversation moving forward so that our own daughters might have a different world. But we see the place of law, which is where Carol and I come in. Sometimes you let society change itself for many, many years, but sometimes you pass law for the society to get to that law. And that's what we want to do. Let's pass the 2/3 law. Let's put the formula in there. Let the society get to 2/3. And then as it continues to change and as these other measures are taking place, but the only problem is I told you it will take us long. So let's have the law, set the higher bar,
Priscilla,
and then have us rush to the law.
Now that you're here, this matter that I mentioned, when talking to someone on the phone, there are things you say. When you see them face to face, there are things you now say.
No, me, I'm still dead set on the 2/3 law.
Open it up.
You see, there are two options here: to either comply with what we see in our electoral process, as in bribe voters, make sure you also insult back, or create a completely different platform. Because how else do you sell an idea? You represent the idea. I talked about conforming or understanding it, but understanding it also comes with understanding what you will not do. And if you do not do, there are very few politicians in this country, but they exist, who are known not to give handouts. They're known.
Yeah, our Mwai Kibaki president, I'm from Udaya, was well known for that.
No,
you vote him because you vote him for his development,
precisely.
Not for money.
No, he won't. And there are people. In fact, what you'll find surprising, very many leaders who stand out there, They are actually not known to give out money. They don't dish out money. They simply don't. Problem is they're few. Now, if you look at that culture, it tells you that people can actually be voted in without necessarily dishing out money. You don't need 10 examples. You need one to know it is possible. It took one lady to become a lawyer for people to realize, this thing can be done. If so-and-so can do it, so can we. That's how these things start out. So, but the journey to setting those new standards is harder than conforming. Are women prepared to take that road less traveled?
We're going to take a break and then we can come back and both of you to answer that question for Priscilla and Carolyn. Before we go and look at what the temperatures are with the weather, CT, remind us of today's proverb.
Today's proverb is a very simple one. And this is something that you ladies may also actually understand. What we're saying today is that you should use your tongue to count your teeth. That's the proverb.
We'll unpack that as we go along. In the studio today with Priscilla Nyokabi and Caroline Kamende as we look at this gender debate and say, really, are we still talking or are we moving? In the Situation Room this morning, we are discussing gender issues and saying, in this fight, how far have we gone? Coming out to just before the break, CT, the question was, are you ready really to take on some of these things?
Well, there's always an alternative in these matters because honestly, if you were to enter politics as it's currently constituted in this country, any sane person would not want to go into it. It requires and it takes too much from you. Because what you want to do is to represent. What you want to do is to actually see some change. But the cost. So the alternative is go with the flow or go against it.
Carolyn, are you ready to bear the cost in terms of what we see now? Take on that cost, take on that responsibility to see some kind of positive change?
Yes, I think also what we need to do, once you're elected to a position, you need to perform. You need to show members that they did not go wrong in electing you. Because it's also very hard to implement this gender rule through election and an election process. And I think this two-thirds gender rule has been litigated upon. There are orders, and those orders have not been implemented. I think it's time for, and I need to say also, this gender rule is not about women only. Like currently the Law Society as the council elect, it has more ladies than men. Are we then now saying that the men need to go to court? What I would say is that it's time for us, both genders, women and men, to take up the challenge. Once you are elected, members have voted you in confidence that you'll perform. Whether we're ladies or men, let us perform. Let us not disappoint them. Let us show them we are up to the task. And for me, we've come a long way since this two-thirds gender rule has been was breathed into life by the new constitution. We have had several bodies implementing it, especially Article 250.11, where it says that the chair and the vice chair should not be on the same gender. We have a long way to go, though, as Priscilla says. But for me, it's competence, performance. Let us show members that you elected me, I'm a woman, yes, but I can perform, I can deliver. Let us not give them, let us not give voters, whether they are from professional bodies or from the normal mwananchi. Let us not give them reason to say that I'm not going to vote in another woman because this woman disappointed me. Yeah, didn't perform. Right. Yes, for me, we are progressive and progressing well. Let us take up the challenge as leaders. Once we have been put in by members, let us perform.
As we wrap this up, Priscilla, is the result worth the cost?
It is worth the cost. That I would say anytime. And he spoke correctly about the cost of being elected in our politics. It is very high cost, but let me tell you, it is also really worth. I sat in as Vice Chair, Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, where we did the family laws. The family laws had been coming to Parliament since 1968. They had never been passed. The Marriage Act, the Matrimonial Property Act. We were using the Married Women's Property Act of England of 1882, with the Parliament since 1963. We were using the Married Women's Can you imagine that you go to court to litigate on Married Women's Property Act of England of 1882. So now it is only when the House had the women reps. It is only when the House had more women that we were able to pass these laws. The protection against domestic violence, and you know how much, our police never had a law around which to litigate domestic violence. And who was saying correctly, you ran from the Al-Shabaab in the city to go and find a terrorist at home. It's also very wrong. I mean, you escape the real terrorist and then another terrorist is waiting for you in the house. So that protection of domestic violence, again, it took women. And I'm happy that Caroline has won, because even the lawyers are not easy to convince on gender matters. It took us a long, long time to convince the lawyers in the committee that these laws were important. We did the company's laws.
Was it just the men or the women?
We were only 4 women, so I think we didn't have the luxury of not being together.
Even convincing them.
The women didn't need to be convinced. They already knew about the situation. And men make these interesting arguments about the urban woman, the rural woman, as though there's a difference in the slap. I mean, if there's gender-based violence, there's gender-based violence in Karen, there's gender-based violence in Quebec. There's no difference in the pain. So when the law needs to be passed, it must be passed for all women. It doesn't matter where the woman is crying from. If you come to leadership, and she's going to see it, there will be places that will not be open for you. There are still Supreme Court judges and Court of Appeal judges and High Court judges who, when you make an argument, they kind of are not sure until a man makes the same argument that you made. If you're in a boardroom and you push a point, I tell you what, your point will not be taken until CT says, I support what Priscilla is saying. Now the point now we can canvass the point. So but the idea I was on myself is that the society is changing. It is worth the cost. We need more women to come into leadership. I've just given a small example about the women reps in Parliament. We had a fund, the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, which is 2 billion worth of money every year for supporting women, youth, and persons with disability. And the company's laws. We were using the company's laws of 1948, some very old laws. So it is worth. The price is worth. And when we come on to leadership, Caroline is right. We really must just prove ourselves.
And keep coming out.
We must just prove ourselves once we get the slot. The question on conforming is one that confronts the gender activists all the time. Do you conform or do you go the unbeaten path? Myself, I kind of wear my own shoes. Where it requires me to conform, I conform. Because if you don't conform, they won't even put you on the table.
Put you on the table.
Oh, you'll be thrown out. You and your untrodden path, get out of here. Go and trod elsewhere. Don't trod here. So if you're, for example, in a party situation and you want to get in and make a point in, say, like there's a meeting being arranged. I mean, for example, what we had in Kinoru, which was huge for Mount Kenya. We're going to give our declaration. You have to do a certain level of conformity for you to fit in with the space. And it also pays because once you are in the room, you now can no longer use the tactics that got you. Once you are in the room now, it is ideas. You have to just let your ideas compete with other people. So a bit of it is conformity. What is good? I mean, it's not that everything is wrong in our politics.
Right.
There are men who command space. I mean, I like, for example, how John Badi or Jacoyo Midiwo or Orengo argue. If you want to copy that and conform with that, nothing wrong. What you can say is, I draw the line at this point. I'm not going to give money because giving money is corruption as well. So once you go into the path of money, then it's a down. So we can choose what to pick from what is working and what to not
to leave
not
behind.
Pick. But at the end of the day, the country must make the decision that we need women in leadership, which is actually the right thing. Our development will never be wholesome for as long as a big part of the population is out of the game. And if you look at our national game right now, for example, you say who's calling the shots on processes like BBI and other national processes, you will find that those are male-led processes. The country needs the talents of its women. It needs the energy and the ability of its women. Once we agree that we need the women on the table, and we say that there is a problem in them getting elected in the national space, then we would not have a difficulty agreeing to quotas. Because once the women come, their talents, their energy, their skills, and remember that we are biologically wired differently. So we are a lot likely to look at health and water and alcoholism and other social problems, as opposed to the men who are likely to look at airports and highways and, and the war in Somalia. Those are the things that occupy men. So we need both of them in the table so that our developments can be wholesome. So if we need both at the table and the election is not giving us the numbers that we need, we then must have a quota system until such a time as we reach the LSK level, until such a time as the election gives us the numbers that we need. When we get there, we will not be asking for affirmative action. But before we get there, affirmative action
is
must
what is
stay.
on the table.
Yeah, must stay on the table. And we are looking at Caroline. We also must
Waiting for you.
reap. We must reap from the benefits of having women in LSK. You know, LSK can play a very big role at national level.
At the national level.
At the proposals that they bring, at oversight and at other things. So we as women in the national space, I want to be looking at the women in the law society. How are they helping us in the debate to get more women? And I hear this debate about some few women get elected, like Martha Karua and Charity Ngilu and others. But those numbers are far too few.
Too few.
So
and
I'm
we need to
hoping
move
that Kina
forward.
Caroline don't say that we are here, we were competent, we were very good in our in our campaigns, we got elected. So I mean, can't the other women just vie? Don't say that can't the other women just vie. There are also challenges out there.
There's
so
a group
support.
of people in this country who also feel marginalized. It's called the youth.
Yeah, sure.
As we wrap this up, I want to give you an example of, there's a young gentleman called John Paul Mwirigi, MP for Igembe South. He was elected at the age of 23. Now, among the things this young man did, he didn't have money, was he looked at the results of the schools in the area he came from, and he went about ensuring that he provided schools with revision materials. What happened over a period that the results in that particular constituency changed drastically,
Through the roof.
and it was attributed to him.
Right.
I know I'm giving an example of a man, but I am saying if one is willing, you can be innovative enough and you can bring about change that people resonate with, which doesn't involve you dishing out money.
Money.
No, we will. Let me just answer him quickly because politics
Yeah.
is a game of numbers, you know.
But-
so it is all very well to have John Paul Mwirigi, and we are happy about him. And it is all very well to have the women, but it is a game of numbers. We want women in numbers. So
the
every time they
message
tell
to-
us that we don't
right.
want one John Paul, we want 20 John
I'm
Paul.
actually
20
talking
women.
about numbers because
Right.
even the men who are successful in politics, the reason why they're successful is because many women vote for them.
Yeah. We'd like to continue this conversation, and of course the conversation continues, but at this point I have to let you both go and say thank you very much for being in the conversation in the Situation Room this morning. Caroline Kamende and Priscilla Nyokabi, asante sana. The conversation does continue. This is Kenya's biggest conversation right here in the Situation Room. Thank you so much.